I think in life and in business and in leadership and in even recruiting, like it's very easy to think about what happened in the past. What's happening next? What's happening over here? What's happening over there? What's this company doing? And I think taking the approach where, hey, let's deal with what's right in front of us right now, and how can we enjoy it? How can we embrace it? And how can we make it a productive problem-solving type situation for everybody is a really nice way to approach things, right? It sounds super simple. It sounds very obvious. It sounds logical, but self-included, most people don't do that, or most people forget to do that. And when they do decide to do that, it kind of brings a little bit of calmness to the situation, right? Because there's so much that you can't control. And so if you're just sitting there and you're dealing with the things that you can control and have influence over, I think it's kind of the best way to look at
things. You're listening to Talent Therapy. Here, you'll find discussions with biotech and pharma leaders around talent and recruiting trends, market insights, and leadership philosophies, so that you and your team are informed around an array of industry perspectives. And now, your host, Chris Tamburini.
All right, Jess Palma, welcome to the Talent Therapy Podcast. It's great to have you.
Thanks, Chris. Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Of course. I've been particularly excited about this episode. I've had the chance to work with you over the years, and I've really enjoyed that experience. And so it would be fantastic if you could give a quick introduction of yourself to the audience.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, again, thanks for having me. I'm excited to have some discussions around these topics, but I'm Jess. I'm currently over at ERA Therapeutics as a senior manager of our TA team. So I lead our function. I've been in the recruitment and TA world for about coming up on 9 years and coming from different industries and types of companies. And it's just been a great experience kind of learning from some experts and continuing to network within the industry, but definitely excited to talk a little bit more and have some discussions around these.
Fantastic. So out of pure curiosity, you said you've been in recruiting and talent acquisition for the last 9 years, which is longer than I thought, but time does go fast.
Time flies. Yeah.
And time flies. So 9 years is a respectable amount of time to be in the industry. A lot of people will enter the industry. And then what path did you come up through in talent acquisition?
Yeah. So I actually started on the agency side when I was in college, actually. I did an internship with AERA, which I know you're very familiar with too, Chris. And took a full-time job there after graduating college and was there for about 3.5 or so years. But I started recruiting in our clinical operations team, was a recruiter for about 1.5 years. So really got that foundation under my belt, and then got promoted into a sales role and was doing that for about 1.5 years. And I worked still a little bit with biotech companies, pharma companies, but I kind of started our academic expertise area as well within AeroTech. So worked a lot with our hospitals local to Boston and academic institutions. So after my time at AeroTech, I decided I wanted to go more in-house in an in-house role. So I joined Blueprint Medicines and had an amazing experience there. Absolutely loved the team I was working with and the culture and the type of company Blueprint is, and was on a team of recruiters. There was about 3 of us, worked with recruiting coordinators, and we were, of course, part of a greater HR team. So I was able to work more, within an HR operations realm of TA, but that was a great opportunity. And then this position over at ERA, a little over 3 years ago now, presented itself. And I knew a couple folks that were connected to people over there and kind of made those connections and had some conversations, and was really excited about the position that ERA was presenting and needed, which was essentially to start recruitment for this startup at the time. They didn't have any in-house and working primarily only with agencies. So I had the opportunity to join ERA and really start the recruitment and TA function in-house, which has been a great opportunity, and excited to share more about that. But that's where I am now.
That's great. Thanks for that overview. So you've done a lot in 9 years. Started off on the agency side, was an individual contributor at a fairly mid to large size, or call it a mid-sized biotech company at Blueprint. And then you went to a company that had no existing talent function and really started up from scratch. And so that in itself is a feat, I think, for anybody. And so I think I would be curious, and the audience would be curious about how that transition went, especially really only having a couple of years of in-house experience before going off to ERA and starting up a TA function from scratch. How did that process go for you? How was it going from a solo recruiter rather to someone who was heading up the entire talent acquisition function?
Yeah, it's a great question. Yeah, it was exciting, but definitely came with, a lot of learning curves and challenges and, not just going into a new TA lead position, but a new TA lead position at a new company. So it was the whole company. Joining a new company in itself is you're meeting new people and building relationships. And then on top of it, starting this process and function from scratch while continuing to meet people and, build those relationships. So, yeah, it was definitely very different, but that's really what I loved about the opportunity, was that it was going to challenge me. And I was at a point in my career where I needed more challenges, and I saw that with this opportunity and was thrilled to face those challenges. But yeah, it was definitely different from from a team of TA and recruiters that were taking over different parts of the organization and recruitment for those functions, and then just like being the sole recruiter and sole TA individual and building that strategy and presenting it to leadership and, getting the approval for what, I proposed for our strategy and our process. And then, really putting trust in hiring managers and setting the stage of, hey, this is what TA looks like. This is what recruitment will look like from now on. These are what the steps will look like. And things that I really learned is that every hiring manager approaches these hires differently, right? Everyone has different things that work best for them. And so it was, adapting to styles and communication styles and really, having that adaptability that I brought forward with owning this process that I feel really worked well for the organization. And so I think that was also a challenge, right? Is going to a new company and having people already like trust you with like new hires and putting a full process in place, whereas, already having that foundation somewhere else. So I think that was the biggest challenge that I faced. But as time kind of grew on, I was able to definitely have a lot of trust within the recruitment process and TA, and have those partnerships with hiring managers that continue to carry on. And we've had a lot of new hiring managers too, who have never really been on that forefront of hiring, right? They've been exposed to it. They've been part of interview processes, but being the one hiring can be really scary, especially during your first go around. So just knowing that they have that support in myself and that guidance through the process, that was what I really wanted to convey to them, is I'm here to drive this strategy and this process forward. But in addition is be that support and make sure they're comfortable with the steps and make sure they're comfortable with what we're doing, because it could be a really tough decision at the end of the day for a new hiring manager. So yeah,
Yeah.
it was different. Yeah.
All right. You walk in there, and I'm sure they had some sort of process, right? I'm sure it wasn't like an optimized process, but do you remember like what the process was before you got there? Because there was nobody doing recruiting at all there, correct?
My manager, Justin Godey, at the time was managing all of it, essentially, right? He had joined earlier on as ERA was kind of built out, and he was the only one in HR. So he was taking on everything from HR operations to HR business part. He was a one-man show, essentially. And he was managing recruitment by, he had a little bit of recruitment experience in his past, but he had relationships with recruiting agencies, and he would really connect them to our needs. And we essentially kind of outsourced most of our roles at that time, before I got there, to agencies. So that was kind of the process initially before I joined.
Okay. So what was the first thing you did? So you saw that process, you saw what was going on. I don't want to speak for you, but I can imagine some of the first things you did. But what was the first thing that you did when you walked in there and you saw the process and realized your role now is to change and optimize that process?
Yeah, it was, first couple of things I did obviously was just get my feet wet. Let's, meet some stakeholders and hiring managers and really understand the nature of the organization and our needs.
Build smart, by the way, like build some relationships and
Yeah.
listen, understand what the needs are.
Yeah, absolutely. Learn about our science. Like that was a whole other, world that Blueprint was different and every other organization's different, right? And so just understanding a little bit more about what we're doing, what we're driving forward. And then, getting to know some of these agencies that we were working with before I joined. But then from there, it was like, hey, put a proposal together, put some information together. Let's see how this process will work. A lot of it is very similar to a lot of other organizations and kind of what I've learned, but I wanted to make sure that leadership was good with it. And so it was like a full kind of proposal of, hey, this is what I envision for ERA moving forward in in-house recruitment. And let's see, how it lands. And then we kind of took off from there. I think the best part of that though was, to your point, like meeting a lot of these managers and understanding the needs of their group and what has worked well for them in the past, what hasn't worked well, and just really digging into those spots if they've been part of these processes in the past and kind of taking that feedback and running with it. So I think a combination of all those things was kind of the first initial responsibilities that I kind of tackled once I joined.
Yeah. Did that feel like overwhelming to you at the time, or were you more just like excited and ready to tackle it? Because you saw how things worked at, I think was a well-oiled machine at Blueprint. You worked at a larger agency, which always has a lot of processes. Was it kind of overwhelming, or you're like, no, this is pretty simple. I got this. I'm excited to like implement this. Like, what were your like feelings around it?
Yeah, I think it was a roller coaster of emotions, honestly, because I joined and I was like, here I am, the recruiter, the only TA person. And it was like the thrill, I think, of joining and just like, yeah, I got this. And then it was like, okay, and then this and this and this. And it was like feedback and things that were coming up. And I'm like, oh my gosh. And then it was the overwhelming feeling. And then a new thing that I could help with, like recognition or, other areas. And I was like, yeah, I got this. And so I think it was just a roller coaster of the excitement and like guns blazing, then switching a flip. And I'm a little overwhelmed and I need to take a step back and I need to prioritize what's going on. And those are the learning curves I faced very quickly, I think. And then again, all on top of not knowing anyone at the company, meeting new people. But I think overall, like going through those roller coasters and experiencing the overwhelming is all because it was so new to me. And that was the challenge that I just kept reminding myself, this is going to be best for me. And this is what's going to help shape me as a TA leader and a recruiter. And just facing those things and tackling them head on was the best thing that obviously could have arose at the time. So yeah, definitely a roller coaster of a lot of different things.
Yeah, definitely will set you up for whatever your future holds, right? At some
Yeah.
point, you'll probably end up in a situation where you need to start or implement or optimize the talent function. And so having that experience, especially so early on in your career, is huge.
Yeah, absolutely.
Were you still doing like a lot of like the outbound, like candidate research and recruiting, or were you really just at that point, like dealing with hiring managers and looking at a lot of like applicants and referrals, or was it kind of a combination of everything?
Yeah, initially still doing a lot of the sourcing. We were a new co and we hadn't launched as ERA yet. So we were very much under the wraps. And so couldn't really, we didn't really have anything to post on except for, LinkedIn, but still doing a lot of the sourcing. Once we launched and our name was out there and people really understood what we were doing and, what our science entailed, truthfully, it's been a lot of not sourcing and it's been a lot of attraction from candidates, which is so great to see because in my other previous roles, I was like heavy sourcing, with applicants too, but a lot of it was on the sourcing side. So Yeah, that was definitely a change, a good change, because it obviously is a compliment to have an influx of applicants, and a lot of people want to work at ERA. So yeah, I mean, I've seen that for close to the 3 years now, which has been really helpful, being a kind of a one woman show. But yeah, a lot more of the applicant game than and going through resumes and working with hiring managers than the sourcing.
Yeah. Interesting. So you go to ERA, you start up a function, you have a lot of responsibility for really building out recruiting process, talent acquisition process. You're meeting a lot of new people, you're learning a lot of new science, developing a ton of relationships, and just probably having a whole other understanding of how drug discovery, platform discovery works. And all of this has been happening over the past 3 years. Smack dab in the middle of that, you became a new parent. And that for anybody is a huge feat. And it's something that changes everyone's life from a day to day basis. And particularly as a mother, right? Like I have kids. Everyone knows that being a new parent is always a lot of work, but it tends to be more work for the mother, right? The mother just naturally takes on a lot more responsibility. And maybe someone wants to have an argument with me about that, but I think innately that's just how these things work. Moms usually take on a lot more of the work. Not that dads don't, but
Yeah.
kids always want their moms, right? That's what it comes
Yeah.
to. And so you're dealing with that, and you are starting up a new TA function. So tell me about that. Tell me about that transition, being a professional, starting a new job, leading a new function, developing a new function, and then on top of that, becoming a first-time parent, first-time mother.
Yeah, I mean, there has been a lot of it's been very rewarding first and foremost, but it certainly has come with its challenges. I think becoming a new parent, I can't speak for everyone, but I'm sure a lot of parents can relate, is like your whole world is totally centered around your child now, and your priorities are different and your intentions are different. And at least for me, I go into things and I view things differently now as a mom. And with our situation, and I'll kind of briefly share a little bit about my son, but he was born with a complication that we found out about very early on in my pregnancy. So it was a whole other aspect of becoming a parent that we didn't think would be adding on to just being a parent for the first time. He was born with this condition. He went through a lot of complications, and we ended up being in the hospital with him for 4 months before we were able to take him home. That added a whole other level of challenge and pressure, and a little apprehensive about going back to work full time, especially for myself. So yeah, so that was a big challenge. And I think with the situation we had, just with what we saw him go through, surgery after surgery, just everything that he went through, my priorities are so different, and my intentions are, so much clearer, I would say, in terms of my day to day. And I think with just understanding of like being a new parent, and then on top of it with what our situation was, I've been coming in every day to work with more empathy and more understanding of my priorities in front of me and being present in the moment. I think that's one of the biggest things that we learned, is just presence, coming in every day with focus on what truly matters and look at what's in front of you and kind of be grateful for that opportunity. And so I took a lot of what we went through and really adapted that into my work life, because what was, obviously really hard is majority of my maternity leave was in the hospital. I was home with my son for 6 weeks before I went back. But one thing that really made me the most comfortable going back was the support from my team and my company. I think that made it just that much easier to feel supported, and knowing that my son's okay at home, and, he's got his support system and whatnot, but that my company is here for anything, and understanding that, I have a whole other life at home now. It's different from what it was. So Yeah, I remember having conversations even too with my manager the last few weeks of my leave, and he would come into the conversation even just proposing the different things that we could do to make me comfortable. If I wasn't able to come back full time, okay, let's look at this option, or maybe be more remote or whatnot. And just the fact that your manager comes to you with options and I'm not coming with options myself to talk about, it was that much more reassuring that I'm in the right place. I am supported. I have a great team behind me. That really helped my transition. But, since then it's been great. And, obviously we have our times where, I have a toddler now. He's about a year and a half almost. And there's days he's sick and I can't come into the office, and my husband and I have to navigate that. But yeah, those are some challenges that of course every parent faces, but it's new, especially being the only one in TA and having kind of or if I'm not there, if I'm not, present, then what gets behind, what work of mine gets behind and sets the organization up differently. So it's always that a little bit of pressure now, feeling of, I'm kind of a one woman show, and I want to make sure I'm showing up and for my company and meeting hiring needs and helping to drive forward milestones that we're hitting on an operational side. And, is being that one woman show, is that going to set anything back, right? But I think I've been able to come in, and I know I've mentioned this several times, to really feel that support from my team and know that, it's okay that this happens, and we're all here to, drive forward these processes and hit goals. But it's okay that sometimes you need to set yourself some boundaries, or you have a different life at home and you need to prioritize that. So it's always that balance of knowing that, hey, we're coming here to work and we're driving our science forward, and that's what we're here to do as a biotech company. But the biggest part that I've really appreciated is being part of a strong company culture that allows new parents and new moms and, anyone in the organization to thrive between those two.
Yeah. I mean, that's saying a lot, right? How much support ERA and your team and the people around you gave you throughout that process. You would expect that, right? In any situation, but companies don't have to do things like that. But it sounds like your company did decide to do that, speaks, I think, really highly of the people who you've surrounded yourself with. I can't imagine, right? I can imagine being a new parent and, having a career alongside that, but being a new parent, having a career, and then having the situation that you were faced with be a special one, and having to deal with that on top of being responsible for a function at a company is just a lot. And I don't think anybody will really fully understand it unless they've been through it themselves. I think it's a testament to you and the people around you at your company who supported you throughout that challenge, which is a really, really nice and a really refreshing thing to hear. That's great. And I think you'll probably be forever grateful for those individuals. And you probably now have a special kind of connection with those individuals throughout your entire career, right? Because that's something that I doubt you'll ever forget, the support they gave you.
Yeah. Oh no, 100%. And it's, if it allowed me to, grow closer with each and every one of them, and even folks not, directly on my team, but people in the organization, just obviously knowing a little bit of your story and just becoming a new mom. And it's always great to have people ask how everyone's doing and ask how he's doing and see pictures. I'm sure people are sick of me now from posting pictures in our Slack channels, but that's also what I love about the company, is that, we get to have these channels and you get to share a little bit about your personal life. And I think creating that personal connection and relationship just helps that much more connect as colleagues and teams.
I like how you said that going through that experience, becoming a new mother, and kind of dealing with that special situation that you dealt with, how it gave you some perspective to focus on the moment and what's here right now. This is really probably a whole other topic, but I think in life and in business and in leadership and in even recruiting, like, it's very easy to think about what happened in the past. what's happening next? What's happening over here? What's happening over there? What's such and such doing? What's so and so doing? What's this company doing? And I think taking the approach where, hey, let's deal with what's right in front of us right now. And how can we enjoy it? How can we embrace it? And how can we make it a productive, problem solving type situation for everybody is a really nice way to approach things. And it's easy to get away from that. It could sound simple, right? It sounds super simple. It sounds very obvious. It sounds logical, but self included, most people don't do that, or most people forget to do that. And when they do decide to do that, it kind of brings a little bit of calmness to the situation, right? Because there's so much in this world and in this business and in life that you can't control. And so if you're just sitting there and you're dealing with the things that you can control and have influence over, it's a kind of a refreshing, I feel like I'm going on like a Buddhist rant here, but like, that's kind of like, that's kind of like a nice way to look at things. I don't even know if nice is the right word, but I think it's kind of the best way to look at things.
Yeah. And no, I appreciate that. I think with the biotech space too, it's hard not to listen to the noise and see what else is going on. I mean, we're in biotech and that's the industry, right? Just to see what other organizations are up to. But I think in ERA's situation too, I think we do a good job of, even as an organization, doing that and trying to keep our head down and driving our science forward. And, for me, it's doing that in support of our mission and our vision and where we want to go. But, we can only control what we can control. And I think continuing to have that mindset of, especially for me, to, not focus on the noise, be present, like what's in front of us. Let's see what we can do with this and kind of go from there is one of the biggest things that I found to shift for me, as I became a mom. But that's also outside of the workplace too for me. But yeah, just seeing what truly matters and focusing on, priorities and whatnot, I think has kind of helped me this year.
Yeah. Which actually segues perfect into the next topic that I wanted to cover with you, which is really like what happens when hiring slows down. It's a situation that now you're being forced to deal with, and many companies and many leaders in recruiting have been forced to deal with that really over the last 3, almost 4 years. Like hiring is just slowed down over the last few years in biotech, and everyone is optimistic and hopeful that the direction is changing. It seems to be changing, but it's no secret that hiring has not been at the top of the list for many biotechs over the last few years. However, a lot of companies, ERA included, have decided to retain their talent acquisition team or certain members of it or certain aspects of the function, but it still doesn't mean that there's a ton of hiring going on. And so for you, and so for ERA, what does that look like? What does it look like for you as hiring has kind of slowed down over there?
We really started slowing down hiring wise, like end of Q2, I would say last year into Q3. And it was really again, we had a strong team focus on what we were doing. We didn't have much need at the time. We're going through, fundraising and doing that whole thing. And so during this full process, it's been really slow recruitment, 1 or 2s here and there. But during this time, I've had the opportunity to work a lot more on the HR side of things, doing a lot of HR operations, which has been also new for me and exciting. So being able to, help with like immigration and working with our, employees on visas and working with our attorney and setting an immigration policy in place and, supporting Justin with that. That's been really, really exciting. I've been able to do a lot with performance management and engagement, putting forth processes and implementing a new system for all of that, which has been awesome. And kind of our first year doing that outside of, our normal like paper routine the previous years. So that's been really cool to implement and just doing a lot of even like communications type things, right? So I kind of spearhead our social media calendar. I work with our media team. I create our content calendar for the year with her and drive that forward, which has been really fun to do as well. So really just having the opportunity to dig into different areas within the organization, whether it is solely HR operations, whether it's engagement within the company, doing things like that and taking those things on have been really fun. And different for me, right? It wasn't the job I was hired to do, but it is something that I'm, grateful that I was able to help take on, and stay here at ERA. So that's been really cool, really just different responsibilities to kind of dive into, which I think only really helps me move and grow from here, is to learn these things so that if my future is more of a TA in an HR type role, like I'm getting my feet wet in a lot of these different areas within HR, and, working with my manager on that, which has been great. So
Yeah, that is great. I feel that in talent acquisition and recruiting, specifically in biotech, but I think in all industries, having that HR experience in conjunction with the TA experience is really instrumental for career growth, right? Otherwise, and there's nothing wrong with this, right? It just depends on what your avenue is, but you give yourself more options. Like, for example, if someday you want to become a chief people officer or CHRO, if you'd only done TA, that becomes limiting. But if you've done both TA and you've gained some of these HR functions, you're really opening up avenues, and you can decide. Maybe you decide you only want to stick with TA. So maybe you decide you want to be more of an HR people leader, and then you can have oversight of both talent acquisition and HR. And so I think it's actually, you have a lot of really good experience for just being in the industry for 9 years and being only in biotech for a few years. So it's setting you up, I think, nicely for whatever you want to do, which is great.
yeah, no, and I've definitely grown to love doing other things outside of TA too. Learning a lot more on the HR side has been something I've wanted to do, even before joining ERA. And so having that opportunity and being able to take on some of these things within HR ops has been awesome. And yeah, like you said, just a great opportunity to learn that side of the business that I haven't yet. Definitely looking forward to continuing that.
Yeah. Well, Jess, this has been awesome. I've really enjoyed this conversation. I think the audience will enjoy it, specifically people who are in your peer group who are kind of making their way up the ranks within talent acquisition and HR leadership. So thank you for being a guest, and thank you for sharing both your professional and your personal stories over the last few years. It's appreciated, and I think it's good for people to hear.
Yeah, no, I'm happy to. And thanks for having me. It's great to have these discussions. But yeah, I appreciate it, Chris.
Absolutely, Jess. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Talent Therapy with Chris Tamburini. This show is for entertainment purposes and is copywritten by Ronan Vance, LLC.